They weren't going to budge in any way, shape or form, so we did really have a fight on our hands.
It became surreal in the fact that you are now up against police officers.
The strike started on the 29th of January 1993. It was triggered when Timex proposed layoffs, a move rejected by the unionised workforce.
This dispute is now into its 90th day, and the signs are that it's becoming an increasingly bitter political one. The president of the engineering union, Bill Jordan, has described Arthur Scargill as the captain of the Titanic.
Go and fight for their jobs! Go and fight to ensure that they have the opportunity to work, to live in decent conditions.
The legacy of the Timex closure is one of bitterness, anger and frustration. But earlier this year, the company and its employees were caught up in a whirlwind of events that closed the factory and left victims rather than victors. This was the tragedy of Timex.
After a 3-week walkout, there was an attempt to return to work. But all 343 employees were barred from the factory and sacked.
I know that it was cold anyway because it had a wee fire here as well, but this is actually where I met your dad.
Is it?
Yeah.
We're right here.
Kathleen McKinnon was 20 at the time, one of the youngest on the picket line.
So what was it like being in it?
It was quite daunting, quite exciting and worrying, I would say. But on the other hand, the amount of people and the feeling of people power was immense. It was similar to David and Goliath. It's like showing people that, okay, you're a small body of people, but standing up for the right thing is always the right thing to do. I'm so proud of the fight everyone gave because it wasn't easy for one single person. People had families and we deserved to fight for our jobs. We had every right to. The strength of all the women in that Timex is unwavering.
But when Timex was in its heyday, manufacturing in Dundee was thriving. At its peak in the mid-1970s, the company employed 6,000 people. As watchmaking declined, so did the workforce. Union opposition to compulsory redundancies in 1983 led to a sit-in at the parts factory at Milton of Craigie.
The tool rooms were all making tools to lock the doors and lock the chains and everything around the factory, like, you know.
Gordon Sampson was the shop stewards convener. After a 6-week occupation, the union secured victory.
Stopped the compulsory redundancy, right, and people had still the opportunity to work. And if they started to leave it on like that, it was their own choice, and there was still packages available for them, like, you know what I mean? That's been the history of Timex all round, like. They didn't want to negotiate, right? They didn't have a partnership. It was, we had to fight for everything.
By the 1993 dispute, Timex in Dundee had switched to electronics. Workers were employed on assembly lines at the Camperdown factory, managed by Peter Hall.
Peter Hall spoke to me one night shift, and he said he was here to deunionise the plant. And he described himself as a child of Thatcher. And he said, I'm going to deunionise it because nobody wants to be in a union these days. And I said to him, you don't know much about Dundonians, and I'll give you a bit of advice. If you hear the words, that's no fair, beware.
Charlie Malone, who chaired the strike committee, believes it was the company's intention to take on the workers.
Oh God, yeah, what happened to that laddie? It shows how important the dispute became as a UK industrial dispute, that we were accommodated, you know, at number 10 to give a petition in. I led the return to work on the Monday.
we were met by 3 lines of policemen on the gates, and they said, "You're not going in." This was industrial action by an employer against their employees, and we've seen that tactic used in a number of cases, such as INEOS and the more recent one, P&O Ferries, where they just sacked the entire workforce at a moment's notice and hired cheaper labour to come in.
We were just pushed away to let a bus come in to do the job. That was soul destroying. You're still there at the end of the day, stand on the picket line for the job, and somebody's away doing it, and it's like, where is the respect from other people, you know, not to be joining, not to scab on a picket line.
We saw, particularly policing, getting much more robust. Got people who were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, never done a thing wrong in their life, suddenly getting confronted by banks of police officers as they attempt to return to work. People will only go back to work if they can't afford to live. And so what we did was we created a pool of talent so we could raise money so people could have the basics they needed. And as the strike progressed and we became more and more successful, we were able to give people a reasonable amount of money to survive on. But it was tough, it was really tough.
Another person who helped the cause was Mary McGregor, a local school teacher who was part of the Timex support group.
Every week we collected money in the streets, we raised awareness across the city, we helped to organise demonstrations, we collected at football matches. These are our badges from the dispute. The orange one was worn by thousands of people around the city.
How widespread was the support? It really seemed to capture imagination, not just in Dundee but elsewhere.
I think that was something quite significant about the Timex. It started in a factory in Dundee, in a small hill in Dundee, if you like. And the notion of what was happening there, this fight against a real injustice that was taking place, spread across the UK and beyond. If you went up to that picket line, what you found wasn't macho men. You found a group of women who were determined to fight for their livelihoods.
Timex called time on Dundee in June 1993 and the factory closed 2 months later. But for the workers, the dispute was far from over. It wasn't until national union officials threatened to pull their legal support for workers that the campaign, which lasted close to 9 months, came to a grinding halt.
The dispute between the union and Timex is over. We're calling for the end of the support group and urging that the money is distributed amongst the members. Thank you very much.
In the end, workers received minimal payouts from Timex, a week's pay for each year of service. Was it worth it? Did it set down a benchmark that workers were prepared to absolutely fight for their jobs and set an example?
I think it was the right dispute, so it's worth it. If you are in a working place and you've got good wages, good conditions and everything like that, and they come along and ask you to take a third of your wages and other conditions, who would take it? Rightly, none. No in Dundee anyway.
Many of those who supported the dispute believe what they stood for 3 decades ago is still relevant.
What's happening now, I think, is obscene. Because as with Timex, when the going got tough, what the company were asking for was to cut our wages and conditions. So we were having to pay for the strategic errors of the company, and that wasn't fair. Because they think it's our duty to get poorer, but yet provide a greater service. Firefighters running into buildings, we expect them to run in fire in buildings and get paid less for it. Teachers, the same. So what we've got is it's an assault on working class conditions.
We're seeing these workers saying, no, we've done so much, we've sacrificed so much. This is absolutely unacceptable, and we want to change the way this country is run and organised so that ordinary people have dignity in their lives. And that's similar to the Timex one.
What happened at Timex has become a distant memory for some in Dundee. But after all these years, the impact it had on workers lives on.
It wasn't an ideal situation because nobody's going to choose to strike, but it did have a lot of advantages now that I look back. It has made me more militant in my life. You know, that's not right. I'm going to deal with that.
If we look at the history of Timex Dundee, right? Yes, you've got to recognise Timex was good for Dundee, right? But Dundee was very good to Timex.